Let me just give Dr. Nick a quick little intro here for those of you that have not had a chance to watch the original launch video or haven't seen some of those emails. So Dr. Nick, as you probably have guessed, is he's a psychologist, but he's also he's a specialist. He's in many other areas such as counseling, human development, sports performance. He is very sought after in terms of corporate consulting and talent acquisition, retention, executive performance and development, and corporate culture enhancement. So currently, Dr. Nick is works in the area of performance psychology for a lot of middle school children, all the way through the professional and Olympic level athletes in all sports. So some examples are NBA, NFL, PGA, and LPGA tours. Works with the Rutgers men's golf team, Johns Hopkins men's lacrosse team, Yale's men's lacrosse team. So very, very talented, very great at what he does. And we're going to talk a little bit today. This is part one of a part two series. So hopefully you can join us for part two later in the week. So starting tomorrow and then also Thursday, there's 2 sessions each day for part two. So hopefully you get something out of part one. You want to hear part two. It'll kind of all come together. So I will, over the last couple of days of doing some of these webinars, I've noticed that nobody likes to have their face shown to us. So it's Dr. Nick and I looking at each other. So would encourage you guys, if you're comfortable, turn those cameras on. I know Dr. Nick is going to be asking some questions and would love some responses to some of what he's going to be talking about. You can control your cameras and your microphones. And if I don't get some responses, I'm going to unmute you. I'm just kidding. I won't do that. But would love to hear from you guys if you have any questions. Feel free to drop some questions in the chat room if you don't want to interrupt Dr. Nick, and I'm happy to pitch those as they come through. So with that being said, Dr. Nick, take it away, man.
Well, Matt, thank you for this opportunity to be part of Centercourt 360. I've been enjoying working for your company and meeting all the staff. It's a wonderful opportunity. Just to add some information about my background, prior to my performance, I was a special ed teacher, so I've been working with kids for many years. I became a school psychologist and eventually director of special education. So my background in our lecture this evening is going to incorporate my knowledge of education, human development, performance psychology, and clinical counseling psychology. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on. I have a lot of information. I would like this to be more interactive, so if you can do so, that would be great. If not, I'll just lecture, and then I'll give you an opportunity to ask you some questions at the end. Okay. Nobody speaks to you more than yourself. I guess we can see my screen, Matt. Yeah, that's confirmation. Thank you. Nobody speaks to you more than you do. And that's a really important piece of what we're going to be looking at this evening, is because in managing stress, the internal dialogue that's going on within you is very, very important. And so we want to take a look at your internal dialogue. We also want to take a look at how you're interacting in the environment. The number of 80,000 thoughts a day is pretty staggering. It's a huge number. Most people would never guess that it's 80,000 thoughts. And don't ask us how we found that out. But anything I tell you, I have to be able to prove, because psychology is a science. These are not just my ideas. Everything I tell you has proof behind it. So you spend 80,000 thoughts a day, about 3,000 an hour, and what are you spending time thinking about? My guess, you might not have a clear recollection of maybe even 50% of those 80,000 thoughts. But during times of stress, when people become anxious, we know that about 60%, if not 70%, or even higher, are around the areas of stress. So you're constantly around, thinking, which is not necessarily negative, but to you, it might be what you describe as truth. So we want to take a look at how you're actually interpreting the information of the world around you and how you're managing stress. The human span of concentration is only 10 minutes. So I'm giving you some background information to help you understand that all I have that I can help you with is teaching you how to think differently. And a great deal of research will show us that as we change the way you think, your performance actually changes, your mood actually changes, your behavior changes. And that's what we're going to be speaking about this evening. Thinking is like breathing. An interesting metaphor. You breathe all the time. You don't think about it. You can increase respirations by breathing harder, quicker. You can breathe from your thoracic area. You can breathe from your diaphragm. You can breathe from your belly. You can hold your breath. Now, just as you can hold your breath and stop breathing for a short period of time, you can do the same thing with your thinking. So we look at those 80,000 thoughts. What if you wanted to reduce those by even 10,000? Could you reduce those thoughts? Certainly you can reduce the quality of those thoughts by stopping them, and I'll give you some very specific techniques that's going to modify them. Your thinking is the foundation for how you're reacting in the world. Your thinking is the foundation for how you make decisions, how you interact with people, and certainly how you cope with stress. Now, I would like you to participate here and tell me what you see. This wouldn't be a lecture on psychology if I didn't start showing you some pictures. What do you see here? Okay, well, I don't have any answers that I can see. So what I'm going to tell you is that a good portion of you may see this square in the center. And you may see these 3/4 circles on the corners of the square, or you may actually see the square on top of the circles. Now watch. There's no square there at all. The white space is contiguous. And the reason I introduce this at this point is to help you understand we're looking for the truth, not what you think is the truth, not what you see, not even what you believe, but what actually the truth is. So when it comes to the reactions of stress, some of which are based upon your beliefs, feelings, values, culture, and some of it's based upon the truth. Now, those of you who saw the square appearing as if it is on top of the circles, the reason I would help you understand that that can't be the truth is that this is two-dimensional. Now, unless you think about the way you think, and most people don't, they just think. Unless you think about the way you think, you might not even recognize that it's impossible for that to be the case because it's two-dimensional, so the square could not be on top. You will also notice that there's no lines here, so the square does not actually exist. But your perceptions versus what the truth is has led you to see it that way. So similarly, when you're looking at how you're managing stress, whether it's your future, whether it's the finances, whether things are going on with your children or your own health, we always want to deal with the truth. So this portion is about telling you about the truth. Now, I'm also going to show you what's called attentional shifting. So I want you now to focus on this 1/3/4 circle in the bottom right of your screen. And I'm going to introduce the other 3/4 circles. Now, what I want you to do is keep your focus on this 1/3/4 circle. Try not to see the other 3/4 circles. Try not to see the square. Now, the longer you can keep yourself focused on the 3/4 circle, the greater is your attention and your focus. And when I work with athletes, and particularly quarterbacks, we're looking at attentional shifting. We're looking at, the amount of time spent in focusing. There's a big difference in closed sports and open sports. I'm introducing that now because next week's lecture will be on closed and open sports. But for now, I want you to stay focused on this 3/4 circle. And when I bring in these other 3/4 circles, try not to see them. Try not to pay attention to them, and try not to see the square. Now, some of you, just because of the number of people that are on this broadcast, have seen the square immediately as soon as I put up the fourth 3/4 circle. Some of you may still have the ability to shift your attention from the square back to the three-quarter circle. And that process is called attentional shifting and is essential in being able to regulate emotions, thinking, and decision making. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Okay, so which letter does not belong? You could type me an answer, or you could unmute your microphone and tell me which of those letters do not belong. Well, the T. I don't know if you saw the T. You may have been focused on paying attention to the letters that were around the T. You might not have seen it as a T. You may have seen it actually as a cross. People see it in different ways. Now, the reason we're using this example is this is helping you understand, what's called critical thinking, which is being able to think outside the box and see things differently. I'm sure you can see the benefit that this would be instrumental in helping you cope with stress more effectively by managing the way you think, by thinking about your thinking, getting a really good idea about the process of decision making based upon the way you are inputting information into you. This is my model of intention and how significant it is in terms of decision making. So every moment of every day, you are making decisions consciously or subconsciously. Now, we know very clearly that our decisions are based upon an intention. You don't get up each day and say, well, should I go to work and work hard today? Should I be honest or loyal? Should I be generous? Should I be caring, kind, compassionate? You don't ask yourself those questions because your subconscious mind is directing you. Just as when you speak, you don't think of every word you're going to say. As I'm speaking now, I'm not thinking of every word I'm going to say. But it's all driven by an intention. I'm sure you've had the experience when you've read a paragraph and don't remember what you've read. You have children, I'm sure they'll tell you the same thing. No matter what age you are, you have experiences with not understanding, remembering what you've read. Now, if I said to you, read a new paragraph. Now, this time I want you to find the two most important points in that paragraph. I think you would read that paragraph differently. Everyone I've interviewed and given this example to have said to me, yes, they would read it differently. What does that tell us? What's your intention on a daily basis about managing stress, exercising, being kind, compassionate, generous, participating in a supportive way, in a corporate way? Your intentions drive your attention drives your decision-making, which drives your behavior. I'm giving you some foundation because information leads us to a decision. And part of the problem with that is that we may be believing things that are not even true. So you can know something and not understand it. You know something, understand it. You can understand something and not believe it. You can understand something and believe it. You can believe things that are not true. You can believe things that are true. You can either value those things or not value them. Then you finally have a decision to make the application of what it is that you believe and value into doing what you do. Now, if I wanted to know what you valued and what you believed, I wouldn't ask you. As my training has taught me, if I observe your patterns of behavior, over a period of time, I will go back and be able to assess clearly what your understanding and beliefs are. It's the way people are profiled. I don't work in the military, but the training I have is used in the military, and this is one of the things that they do in profiling. So if you wanted to know what you actually believed, and sometimes people have a hard time being able to express that, but I can assure you that if you spend time looking at your patterns of behavior, you're going to go back and understand your belief system. This will help you clearly in working with your children. Now, before I go on, are there any questions at this point? No? So I don't want you to think about pink elephants at this moment. Don't think about pink elephants. Now, before I even put those pictures up, my guess is you could have been thinking about pink elephants. When you tell yourself not to do something, it's hard not to do what you tell yourself not to do. I'm sure you've had the experience with your children as well. You tell them not to do it, frequently they do it. All of this is around your thinking, so you can see it would describe as paradoxical intention or reverse psychology, that the way you think, the way you communicate is going to profoundly affect the way in which you're going to function. We're going to go through quickly how change takes place, and then I'm going to start giving you some pointers about how to deal with stress. There's only about 5 factors that influence change. Maturation. You couldn't ride a bike if you're only 2 days old. Maturation is an important part of being able to change your behavior. Coercion. Being forced into do something. Well, that's what's happening in our life right now. There are decisions being made for us, as we can't go certain places. We've been told to stay in our homes. We've been told not to spend time with friends or family outside the home. We're being coerced into doing that. Now, maybe it's for our own good, and clearly you can see it has changed our behavior. It's changed the way we think. It's changed what it is that we believe. It's changed the way we function and the things that we feel. Crisis is another example of change. The problem with crisis, which we're also faced with, is that you can't predict what the change is. 9/11 produced a major change in our country. And it produced a greater awareness, and now it's caused us to become more suspicious of terrorism. So when we look at these factors that are influencing change, most of these are beyond our control. Your maturation is going to occur in a spontaneous way. And coercion is outside your control, and so is a crisis. But now we get into some experiences that you might be able to manage more effectively. Discomfort is a prime mover in change. I'm sure all of you are feeling some degree of discomfort, whether it's the quarantine, whether it's your own illness or health, or you're concerned for your loved ones. But there's some degree of discomfort that is influencing your behavior currently. And the last one is the act of the will. And the interesting thing about the act of the will is that you can make a decision, and it's self-generated. It's not caused because something else is going wrong. It's because you have decided you don't want your life to be or react in a certain way that you have before. These are the 5 prerequisites of change. Any questions at this point? Well, this is not an Easter egg. It is a PET scan, which is a scan that measures the heat of the brain. So on the left side of the brain, over here, you can see a lot of red. And on the left side of the brain is where analysis is. It's where your thinking is. On the right side is where the creativity is. And it's where emotions are. So you can see that in this example, that there's a lot of heat on the left side of the brain. Now, you can't feel that. There's no heat receptors in your brain. But when this happens, the very first thing that goes away is your ability to analyze data effectively. So children will not do well sometimes if they're anxious on math tests or science tests or even in English literature, because the ability to analyze data and actually even speak effectively is influenced by what's happening with this portion of the brain. Now, the right side of the brain, where emotions are and creativity is, can also be affected. Now, there's a dynamic interaction between these two. The emotions can produce thinking that's negative. The negative thinking can affect the emotions. So let's use an example about how you can think and it will affect your body, actually your biology. I would like for all of you right now to imagine a piece of fruit in your mouth, something juicy like watermelon, a peach, apples, a good piece of steak. Now, as you're imagining that, and if you do this with intensity, you will notice that you will start to salivate. And that salivation will go on for about 3 minutes. In spite of the fact you might try to stop it, it won't stop. Now, because psychologists are weird dudes, we measure the amount of saliva in your mouth when we ask you to imagine a piece of fruit in your mouth. And then we measure the amount of saliva when there's actually a piece of fruit there. And they are exactly the same. What's this about? It's about the fact that what you think, imagine, even if you know it's not true, may still influence your brain as if it is. So when we look at how that might affect us in terms of either our fear or anxiety or suspicion, frustration, anger, sadness, loss, guilt, you can see how it will affect your brain. So we are trying to help you find a way to regulate your brain by using the activity of thinking to modify those responses and clearly decision-making. Now, if you look at this brain on the right side, you can see it's nice and blue and green. And this is the same individual prior to being trained how to change your mind. Now, if we look at this in terms of analysis, and that's in terms of perhaps schoolwork or in leadership, in a corporate way, or even in your family, what happens to an athlete is that when both of those things are occurring on this side, the muscles tense up and you can't run as quickly. You will lose strength, power, agility, and speed. So my work with athletes is to help them modify this so that their brain reacts like this, so they can think more clearly, make quicker judgments, analyze the data, and not have these things manifest in a physical way. Any questions at this point? Now we're going to talk about stress management. What is stress? A simple definition of stress and an accurate definition of stress is that it's anything that moves the individual away from equilibrium. So what is equilibrium for you? Well, it certainly isn't being quarantined. It certainly isn't that you can't go to the store and buy anything that you want or be concerned about people that you're around because they may be contaminated and might influence your health. What a suspicious life we have to lead at this point. So our stress level has changed because things have been modified. A simple example of stress is even going on vacations because it's different than usual. And if any of you have been to Disney World, either as a child or with your children, grandchildren, if you look around, not a lot of people are very happy in Disney World because it's stressful. Trying to have fun, trying to please the child, trying to please yourself. It's a simple example of what stress is. Now, stress is cumulative and progressive. So the cumulative piece is 1 and 1 makes 2, but the correct progressive piece of that is that that becomes a factorial. So I like to use this metaphor that I've come up with. I want you to imagine your mind as a brain, your mind as a container. And in this container, we're going to pour different color fluids, and the volume of which would reflect the intensity. So if we're using red to reflect the intensity of the coronavirus, just the knowledge, and yellow now represents finances, whether it's loss, blue represents the future, orange represents what's going on in the rest of your life. Now, if there were different volumes, which reflects the intensity of how it's affecting you, and we poured it into the container, and I asked you now to pull out just your reaction to the coronavirus or to your future, to your finances, you wouldn't be able to do that. So part of the problem is the input that's going into our mind and eventually into our brain is governed by the way in which we see things. Part of that is affected by some basic things that we're born with, which are called predispositions, and others are based upon what's going on in the environment, which we have no control over. Stress suppresses immunological systems. Well, we're already in a compromised position because of what's going on with the health. And now, if we don't manage our stress effectively over the next several months, your immunological system might get affected by that, even if you're not affected by the virus. So one of the reasons why we're doing this in our outreach is to help people understand it's important to live a healthy life. And in the capacity that I have is to help you learn to think differently, manage your life differently, make some different decisions. The first line of managing stress is to manage the environment, the external environment. And those are things like TV, watching the news, multimedia, anything that you're looking at that might be producing additional stress. I would encourage you to reduce the amount of input in your mind about all the things that are going on out there. Is it really going to help you? I understand you have a need to know what's going on, but you might not have a need to go over it and over it and over it in your mind. So I'm asking you to think differently about how you're managing the environment and bringing that information into you. Now let's take a look at the internal environment. And here we're going to go over some basic skills all around the process of what's called thought control. Now, just as I gave you the example that you can hold your breath, which is a clear metaphor for being able to hold a thought, try that at some point. As an intrusive thought comes in, something you can't control, or a rumination, you're trying to solve a problem, or something that you become obsessed with, or something that's automatic or spontaneous. Help yourself see that you can actually stop that. And just as your body eliminates poisons on a daily basis, you're able to do the same thing with your thinking. So in this thought control, we're shifting your attention away from the process that has been very familiar to you to do something that's unfamiliar. Now, many of you will report that this is going to be difficult. And I'd ask you to use the word unfamiliar and not difficult. I think it's very probable that you can shift your attention, change your mind, let go of things. Let's have you work on that. Cognitive restructuring is the ability to take the thoughts and rational disputation and challenge them. Just because I think it doesn't make it true. Just because I feel it doesn't make it true. Just because I believe it doesn't make it true. You know, people believe things all the time that are not true. It's the reason why people go to war. People believe things that are not true, and they decide then that they're going to live their lives on those beliefs. Beliefs are not telling us the truth just because we believe them. Neither are feelings. So when you look at the ability that you have to change your mind, restructure what you're thinking, come up with another way of understanding things, seek other ways, you'll see that you're able to control this. Now, we're also going to have competing images. Now, a good way to do this is if a thought occurs that's a negative one, we want you to immediately have a positive image, something unrelated to that negative image, something positive. And we know that we can shift your attention from the left side to the right side. We have the ability to do that. As you're looking at your computer now, without moving your eyes, you can see things to the left or right, only by shifting your attention, pardon me, not because you've actually moved your eyes. Your attention is in your control. You're driving down the road and a deer jumps out or a child gets close to the curb. You don't have to tell yourself to put your foot on the brake. You do it immediately. What I'm asking you to do now is take a look at how you can actually qualify what you're thinking. Make decisions that are in your best interest by shifting your attention and coming up with different options. Distractions. Let's keep you moving. Let's change things with some frequency throughout the day. Scheduling is a really significant part of maintaining well-being. Since the human span's concentration is only about 10 minutes, frequent challenges to us are to stay focused. My suggestion, even with students studying, is that they're studying for 20 minutes, take a 5-minute break, study for 20 minutes, a 5-minute break, study for 20 minutes, and take a 20-minute break. I would make sure that on a daily basis that you are scheduling yourself so you know what you're going to be doing, you have something to look forward to. And that in addition to that, you change the task with frequency. Make sure there is an opportunity for pleasure. Use your senses, which is a good example of mindfulness. We'll talk a little bit more about that in our next session. You know, the Greeks said years ago, walk amongst the lilies. And the reason that they said that was not just to take the exercise of walking, but it was to exercise the senses. The olfactory sense, the visual sense, the kinesthetic sense. Experience other phenomena that are around you every day by using your senses. And by doing that, you're going to shift functioning of your brain. It'll help you clear your mind and think more clearly. The relaxation techniques we'll be doing in session 2. I hope that you join me for that. It'll be a very deep, guided imagery, hoping to produce what's called an altered state of consciousness to help you relax and teach you how to do so. Any questions to this point?
Nick, I got a couple of things I just would ask, I guess, maybe for the audience, because they're being shy today. What are some practical takeaways from this, and maybe some homework assignments or some projects that these families can do together, something they can work on kind of day to day?
It's a great question, of course. Every day you're making decisions, thousands of decisions a day. Do you make the decision to enjoy yourself? Do you make the decision to spend time together as a family? So that's what I would say, that the decision making is you have to have a plan. That's why scheduling is a very important piece of this. I would start with that. I would identify what is going to help you not only feel better, but function differently. Take a list of things that distract you. Take a list of things that produce pleasure within you or your family, and try then to integrate them with frequency throughout the day. So you're going to need to do some kind of analysis of what's going to help people. It's a great opportunity to work together as a unit. So I would say scheduling is the first line of doing that.
And you talked to me before about goal setting and how important that is, whether it be through athletics or just academics or anything in life, but how strong goal setting is for overall stress reduction and performance.
We'll take a look at that very quickly, and then I want to jump back to what I have to say about children and adolescents. And so in the goal setting, so let's say an outcome goal is what you want to achieve. Let's say you want to reduce your negative thoughts by 50%. A performance goal then would mean, for the first hour, I'm going to interrupt my negative thoughts at least half the time. And the process would be, I have to develop an awareness of doing so. So if you look at how this process works, you'll make the goal, you'll be able to measure what's taking place, and then you'll take a very specific action. Becoming mindful is the first step, becoming aware. And then as you try to put that into what you're doing for your performance goals, it'll turn out to your outcome goal. Now, this is a very, very quick, brief description of this, as I know our time's running short. But I can tell you that if you don't set goals, and scheduling is a really important piece of this, the day will go by. People are losing the day. They don't even know what day it is at times, mostly because they're not scheduled like they were before. This is a very unfamiliar time. So I would say make sure that there is something that's structured as a better way of being able to interact with the issues at hand here. I'd like to deal just for a few moments. I think we have about 10 more minutes here. I want parents to become aware that this can be a very profound time for grief for children. Some children won't have the experience of graduating from 8th grade, high school, or college. Now, grief is not only something that you no longer have, and frequently we think only of death that way, but when you also integrate grief as part of what you dreamed you could have, you can no longer have. And that's a lot of what everybody's going through. You can never have the experience of late winter, early spring this year the same way. It's gone. So we want to make sure that we understand if there is a grief reaction taking place, that you really pay attention to that. I'm going to move through this very quickly just for the sake of time. Be aware, particularly for children who are 8th graders or high school students or collegiate students or athletes or even academicians, they might not be honored in the same way they had longed for. So this reaction could be very profound, let alone your own experience as a parent who might not have the same experience. We want them to be frequently involved with spending time with friends in a corporate way, via video. For parents, the most important thing I think I could say to all of you here is that you are in a position of demonstrating, the most effective model you can be, that your family is going to be okay. We have to produce security for them. And the way that they're going to feel secure is that you treat them in a way that's not so different than it was before. If they see anxiety about you, if there's some stress as a result of what happens with living with one another, little cabin fever, we want to make sure that you use this as an opportunity to lead effectively, to show them that you're not worried, that your security is the foundation for what's going to occur with them. The last piece I'll go over, and then I'll open this up for some more questions. This piece is a very, very profound piece. So I know you're looking for some techniques. I've given you several. The next one, I think, is the most profound of all. It requires understanding. If you don't understand what your child's going through, and you think you may, if they get a sense that you don't understand them, they won't feel secure. Understanding is essential in human belonging. Humans do not do well if they live on their own. And there's clear demonstrations of people growing together in crisis, where you can see people singing in Italy on their balconies, where you see people in corporate prayer, they come together, singing songs, fellowship, all the kinds of activities that will bond. Now, the only way that's going to occur is if your children feel understood, your family feels understood. It will make a difference in how you cope with the disease, with the stress. There are very, very great studies that have showed us people that are having a sense of belonging cope much better with stress than people who don't have a sense of belonging. Well, thank you for your attention. I want to make sure I give you some time to ask me some questions. I hope I didn't ramble on too much.
Thanks, Dr. Nick. Anybody, any questions? We are going to send out a recording of this, so you can certainly reference back to it. And obviously hope that everybody joins us for part 2, either tomorrow or Friday, depending on what works with your schedule. We have a 5:30 and a 7:30 slot for each day. So, but any questions here now? No? Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Dr. Nick, and thanks everybody for joining us. And we'll catch you again soon. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening.